That's what I found on when I was doing summer to winter.
Yeah.
I realized it was really hard because it was such a huge delay on YouTube. People were watching there and posting.
Yeah.
I think it was like a
Hello and welcome to Introduction.
Just your microphone, Alex, is just dropping out a bit.
how about now?
Yeah, that's
Should
a
be
bit better. Yeah.
okay.
All right, cool. We're live
All right.
and we have 15 people watching. So,
Yay! That's
Sweet. Hey, 15 people.
people. Um, yeah, welcome, guys, to the winner reveal. I'm really excited about this. We had some amazing submissions this year for the Cyberpunk competition, and I'm joined by Alexei Golovchenko. He's the supervisor at environment supervisor at Pixamondo, and Jimmy Vincent, who is a bit of an elusive guy. But he is an astoundingly good ArcViz artist. So we may later be joined by Nick Marshall, who is the head of department of environments at DNEG in Vancouver. But we're just waiting to see if he is able to join us. All right. Well, I guess, guys, before we start the competition review, why don't you guys give everyone an overview of your background and where you've come from, because some people might not have seen the other streams. So, Alex, do you want to go first?
Okay. Yeah. So, name is Alexei. I'm environment supervisor at Pixamondo in Toronto right now. Before I spent about 4 years at DNEG Vancouver, starting from just a DMP artist and was a lead, and I was a supervisor at the end on the TV division until the basically spring last year. And yeah, originally I'm from Ukraine, and I started with the web design like bajillion years ago, and then slowly worked my way up as a graphic designer, and then I discovered matte painting at some point on mathepainting.org, and that was kind of like a fascinating thing. So since then, I'm just keep doing this. I'm like cannot stop for some reason. I don't know. I should have probably, but I know. Let's keep going. So yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell.
One of the things, before I throw it over to you, Jimmy, one of the things that was said to me years ago when I was still trying to get into the industry, I was having lunch with the environment team at Weta, and we were walking to lunch, and the guy asked me like, "Oh, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to get into the film industry." And he turned his head kind of snapped towards me and went, "You sure?" And I was like adamant. I was like, yeah, I do. And he's like, well, it's not too late because once you're in, you're in. You're stuck. um,
Pretty much.
yeah, it's like it just becomes this endless like next job, like next thing to do. Yeah. All right, Jimmy.
Yeah. So, hey guys. My name is Jimmy Vincent, and I am actually an architect by training. So, went to undergrad and grad school for architecture, and then have been a designer for a really long time at an architectural firm, and then moved into being director of visual communications. So now that's what I do on a daily basis. We call it visual communications because it usually kind of encompasses a little bit more than just doing renderings and stuff like that. So um, so some days I make renderings, and other days I do budget stuff. Is kind of the day to day now. So yeah, that's about it. So, and then obviously in my free time, do my own personal work as much as I can. So.
Awesome. I'm gonna bring in Nick as he's just come online. So just give me a second, guys.
And I guess same. Once you're in architecture, you're never out. It's like
Yeah.
it's a it's a black hole of nothingness. You're just there for life.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think Nick's joining us now.
Hello.
Go.
Hey, how you going?
Hello.
Not too bad. It's a horrible wintry day here, but pretty good otherwise.
Yeah. We're just before we start, we've just done a round of sort of introductions of where everyone's sort of come from and what they do now. So, Nick, you're next up.
Sweet. Damn it. My timing was impeccable. How much detail do you want me to go into?
Oh, 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay, cool. So I started out my career, I guess, pretty much straight out of university. I studied for visual effects as a degree. Started my career pretty much straight after that. Did got my start at DNEG as a runner, so right on the bottom rung of the ladder. But it was a great little entry route for me, and allowed me kind of good access to some knowledge and some people I wouldn't otherwise have had. And I kind of just rode the wave, really. Like I'm one of those unusual people who's stuck around at one place and been fortunate enough that I've kept getting good opportunities that have meant that I've never kind of felt the need to jump ship. So I worked my way up from a runner into a kind of roto prep paint type of role. And after doing that for about a year, I was working with a guy who was my kind of mentor at the time, who was our art director, a guy called Gorel, who um, gave me the opportunity at that point to either move into a concept art role or a matte paint role, which was kind of a bit of a turning point for me career-wise. I had to kind of make a decision as to whether I wanted to go down the really sort of creative and artistic route into concept art and join him starting a new team of concept artists who were at that time, I think, working on just starting out on Man of Steel, the first one.
Mm.
But decided that kind of my real calling was still to do some shot work. I still really had a passion for putting images in the actual shots. So I chose to go the matte paint route instead and worked my way through that for a few years. Jumped into a kind of lead role eventually, working with Ludo Iosham on who I'm sure people will know from his own Discord channel. Working with him on Thor 2, when he stepped into a supervisor role, I joined him as a lead on that project, and then carried on doing that for a little while before moving over to Vancouver when DNEG was starting their office there. So that was kind of a weirdly fresh start for me. It almost felt like joining a new company because it was a different office, and
Mm.
the people that were starting that were almost entirely different group of people to those that I'd worked with in London. So it was sort of reestablishing itself again. So I carried on working as a lead for a little while, and then jumped into a supervisor role for Star Trek Beyond. And then after supervising for a little while, kind of had a bit of a structural shift and departmentalized at that time. So they offered me the chance to move into a head of department role. So that's when I moved into a head of environments for the Vancouver office.
That's
That's where I
that's
worked
amazing.
for last year.
For those who don't know what a runner is, a runner basically does all the small jobs. They'll even go and like grab tea and coffee and I don't know, like I mean I never really like worked at many places with runners, but as far as I know, it's like printing jobs or running errands or picking up posts. Like it's really just an assistant to anyone, right?
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm dating myself a little bit here, but at that time it was a lot of, at least in central London, the way that work was delivered was on hard drives that the runners would then literally
Mm.
physically deliver to another
Oh
facility.
wow.
So yeah, it was there was a lot of that going on. It feels so old to be saying that now, but yeah, I
It,
remember there being times where people would accidentally deliver the wrong drive of finished work to a facility that weren't supposed to get it and have to go back and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we just delivered you a project there that you're not actually involved with. So can we just get that drive back from you before you take any data off of it?"
wow.
So yeah, it was
So
seems very old school now.
that that really highlights, I think, how you went from zero to hero effectively. You've gone from let's assume, because our audience and all the people out there want to become map painters. So hey, it's Jimmy. Um,
Yeah, hey.
Mhm.
so you've come from the very entry job where you're not even in an artist role, and you've now gone to the top of that
Yeah.
respective artist role. So really, it does highlight that you don't have to start as a matte painter to get into matte painting and to rise above that.
No, I mean, at the time when I got offered that role, it
It's
was
so
kind of one of
amazing
those
to hear
things.
that. It's so different in our industry.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I mean, it's still so like degree based, right? Like it's still a matter of like where you went to school. Like that's still a really huge deal. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's why kids are still dumping like thousands and thousands of dollars to go to Ivy League schools. It's kind of insane, like that architecture hasn't caught up in that
Yeah.
manner. Or in
Yeah.
a way like reverted, right? You used to be able to like kind of apprentice under like a really famous architect like back in the day, like for Le Corbusier or something like that. But now it's like you go to school, and if you don't go to school, and if you don't go to a good school, then
Yeah.
it's probably not going to end well.
Yeah.
All right. So the way that we're going to run this is we're going to start with the top 10, and we're going to go from 10th to first place, and we're going to reveal who the next the next position submission was. And we're going to have a quick discussion around that submission, what the judges' feedback was, and any of the judges' picks, whether it be best composition, best technical, or best or personal favorite. So I think what we'll do is we'll just get started then, and I will announce so I'll share my screen for you guys to see exactly what we're looking at. And let's just do that. Okay, so you guys can see my screen, and I'll just flick between the screens on my end. So just give me 1 second. All right. Just got to make sure that I don't reveal the scores inadvertently here. Okay, so in 10th place was Isai Ramirez. So this is Isai's. Do you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. So this is Isai's submission, and he got a total of, let me see. He got a vote for best composition, which was from Fabio Pavelli, who's our ArchViz. He's one of the founders of D2. And Fabio says the choice of framing the shot from above and at an angle, also looking down, makes you feel like you're inside a flying car approaching the city at speed. It was a brave choice that paid off. The colors are tied together by areas of complete darkness and strong highlights. The picture caught my eye, even as a thumbnail. Bravo. So one thing that strikes me about this is it feels like a marriage of Blade Runner and Gotham City, which I think was really, really cool. And I love this left-hand side here that feels kind of like there's a reflection. I mean, it is a bit warped and kind of, I'm not sure if it makes sense, but it does feel like maybe there's something in front of the glass that's actually distorting the light that comes through. But Alex, do you want to talk about this one a little bit more? What?
I mean, I liked it overall. Like I'm basically, when it comes to framing and composition, I'm very like simple. I like the simple stuff because it's like the most, kind of like not in your face, but it's just basically, it always works. And like I like the stuff when you can see the image for like a couple of seconds and you already have your impression of it. It's like, do you like it or you don't like it? You know, that kind of stuff. I like this one. To me, the thing I kind of was missing a little bit. It's like I like the composition. I like it's like dynamic and it kind of shows the scale. To me, it was a little bit generic overall. Like the color choices was mostly okay. It's like on sort of like either greenish, yellowish, or like a red
Mm.
sort of holograms and stuff. I would love to see a little bit more like variation of the colors for the cyberpunk, because it's supposed to be like, it's a disco on like steroids sort of a thing, to me at least. And the other thing is architecturally it's a little bit suburby in a way. Like you kind of like approaching those two big buildings, but I don't know. I don't feel I don't have a feeling like I'm approaching either something big, like say like in Akira when they're like on the bridge and you can see the city behind it, but and it's massive and they're going there. And in this case, it's like, are we leaving the city, or it was just like some didn't really get good idea on what's happening and like why are we here, why we're showing this. Like
Mm.
to me wasn't clear of like the subject. So I guess that's why I think it kind of like didn't make the cut to this, like the first couple of entries in that sense, to me at least. So it's a solid piece. It just needs a little bit of uh, like maybe another pass or two, but
Mm.
overall pretty
Yeah,
good.
I see what you're saying. It does feel like a little bit like the city kind of, I mean, it does disappear into the fog, but it doesn't get any bigger or smaller out there. And these two elements are the biggest buildings, and I feel like it would have helped to have had like other elements back here that were continuing out of the frame.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it's yeah, could be that, yeah, as well. It's
Mm.
a
Jimmy
good point.
and Nick, do you guys have any comments on this one you want to talk about?
I think just for me, like coming from the architectural perspective, I think anytime you do an overall city shot like this, there has to be like if you're only going to focus on the architecture. And I actually took a different approach to this contest completely. So, and you know, in what I probably wanted to see. But anyway, like looking at this one, I think if you're going to shoot architecture like this, then you still have to have like a primary focus, right? Like that would be another great piece of architecture, right? So
Yeah.
like right now everything has like the same prominence. It's a bit kind of like okay, it's a shot of a city, but if you're going to do something like this, then and it's only going to be about the architecture, then there has to be one special piece of architecture that
Yeah.
becomes that focus point, I think. Or as already was said, is like if you're leaving, then it becomes whatever is in the background, and you're leaving that and moving on or whatever you're doing. But I think that that's kind of part of the problem. Is there's just kind of the hierarchy is pretty consistent um, for the architectural elements. So
Yeah.
I think everything else for me, I think, is quite pleasing. I do like the composition quite a bit. I think it could have been pretty cool too. Like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe you could have fooled with it or not, but maybe like pull the viewer slightly inside the ship. Maybe
Mm.
framing it a little different could have helped. I don't know. I mean, maybe just something to try. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with those comments. I think I like the composition on this one quite a bit too, and I think that it feels quite grounded. The all the objects feel very solid. There was a few pieces that sort of strayed where they started to feel a little bit more akin to concept art, because
Mm.
the lights and objects didn't necessarily feel a part of the architecture, whereas this one I thought was really solid in that regard. The material responses on things felt good. It felt kind of it held together quite well. And I like the Dutch angle and some of those leading lines taking you through the piece. I think the probably for me it was a little overlit. it could have probably helped by just trying to focus the lighting down and using the lighting to try and highlight your focal point a little bit more. That, you know, there's some quite hot highlights on top of some of the buildings here that feel a little unjustified.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, it was a really nice piece.
Yeah. Now that we're talking about the light and Jimmy's comment about architecture, the way that the perspective lines lead your eye to this back piece here, but then you're just presented with this just boring flat, you know, and in fact that is the least interesting element of the whole environment, which is kind of disappointing because you see all this really interesting stuff down here that's really well composited, and then you get led to this end point which you just presented with a wall. But yeah, I thought the same. I thought this had some solid work and just needed a little bit more more to it. Okay, so next up is Baloney, which I think I can't remember this person's actual name. So Bill Andriopoulos. So let me just full screen that. Nick, I guess let's start with you on this one, and yeah, just give us your initial thoughts.
Cool. Yeah, I thought that this one, there was tons going on in it. There's loads of content in there, which is really cool. Some of the sort of framing elements of the composition were quite nice here. And it does have that kind of that big building in the center that acts as a focal point, which is cool. I like the sweeping lines that kind of guide your eye into the image. For me, where this one, this is actually probably a perfect example of what I was talking about previously, where some of the lighting and the elements in the scene don't necessarily feel connected to the architecture that they're representing. So it strays sort of more towards a concept art piece, but it has a really great mood. It's got a great sense of activity going on. So there's a lot to like here too.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing for me, was the way that light doesn't respect the geometry in a lot of areas, and it just feels quite concept arty. Down here is a little bit sort of like not sure what's going on with the structure and the forms, and then this background piece is kind of like you said, it is a really nice piece, and it's got a nice form to it. But it's, as a matte painting, it's like, okay, it needs to be taken from where it is, and because it's got so much going on, it would probably take a good 2 weeks to really clean up all of the details and make them match and respect the light casts and the different environments that
exactly, yeah,
that it's all going on,
and just resolve the design of all of those pieces into something that's cohesive. And
yeah, exactly. Jimmy, did you want to say anything about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think I like this one a lot, actually. I mean, I thought it was a pretty well done piece. I agree that it's more on the concept art side. I think that the bottom could have been a little bit darker for me, so it kind of feels like there's a little bit more depth. Right now, it's pretty, when you get to the bottom of the image, it's pretty kind of evenly lit with that kind of track that's coming across that top stuff. Also, too, I mean, I think that the story of the image with these people sitting up on the balcony, I think it would have been nice to maybe, have them closer in the foreground, so you kind of felt like you were there with them experiencing it. Because right now it's kind of like I don't know, it's like you're a ghost floating in space kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's only, my architecture speaking, like where I kind of want to feel a little bit more grounded or involved in the image a little bit more. So I think that would have been pretty cool to kind of take the advantage point of that situation. Could have been pretty cool.
Yeah. Alex.
To me, I like this one, but to me, this is the opposite from the previous one. Like, to me, this is too much of everything, and like, it's too much light, it's too much going on, which is, I guess it's supposed to be this way. I was just personally just overwhelmed with everything. I'm still looking at this. I keep staring at the tower, and I'm trying to again understand why am I staring at the tower, because I guess the passes kind of like leads to that, and the people kind of looking at this, and uh it could be a main piece, but I just, again, the story is probably not what I can imagine going on. Like I don't see the point. The bottom part to me, like the what's going on behind the bridges is this is pretty much where is it like a bit too much, and I think the scale problems also there kind of with the lights, because the lights on the buildings, it's always they can either make it or break it to me.
Yeah.
It's always like this. You always judge them because you know what they kind of supposed to be in terms of like the real life scale, and you always associate it with human scale with yourself, and then you judge it everything based on that. So to me, I think wasn't really successful in terms of like lightings and all that kind of stuff. But I think like the this one and the previous one, when I kind of like think about the challenges like this, I expected to see be more of an establishing shot, not just a shot, because the previous one was a perfect shot. It could be a perfect shot from the sequence. You can just pause it. And it's like, okay, we're going into this, and we kind of like stopped, and there is like no motion blur, we see anything, but it's just a part of the sequence. And this could be also the
Mm.
same. Like we're not seeing the main stuff, which is to me in the context, it should be a more an establisher, which is think like if you, do you want to see it for 6 seconds on the big screen, right? And like what's going on, like what are we selling here? It has to be some sort of this kind of a story.
Yeah.
Technically it's well made. I liked it. I like the lighting on the left and on the right. It feels like it's sort of kind of like industrial, but cyberpunky stuff. It's just the story wise and the whole being like establishing piece didn't quite work for me.
Yeah. Cool. All right, next one. Let's see. Just 1 second. Okay. Here we go. So I'm not sure, and I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce the name, so I'm sorry if I get it wrong, but Pozong Huang. So I I saw an earlier version of this, which I can't quite remember what it looked like, but I think this came a long way from that, and it looks really nice. The thing for me, like what really works is that if you took away all of these neon signs and you took away the ships and you just had the environment there without, I mean, it's effectively what the map painter would have done if that was the only thing in the scene. It would I feel like it would be a cohesive environment. We've got some really nice depth here, and a lot of the lights back here seem to work really well. We've got some smoke stacks which look great. Everything seems to be, at least through the busyness of the stuff on top, it all looks like it comes together. The biggest downfall for me on this is that there is so much going on, and it's so evenly spread out across the frame that my eye kind of, you see these engine glows, and then you see these signs and like these big holographic things. This one's probably the most distracting because it feels like it's actually doing something rather than like this is clearly saying, hey, come here, and we've got girls, and this might be Adidas or something, whereas this one feels a bit like Godzilla kind of hologram coming to destroy the city or something. So my eye just doesn't really know where to look in here. That would be my main comment on it. I'll swing it back to you, Alex.
Yeah, I think this one, I remember this one was on the last review. We quite complained about being boring, going like not like having essentially two images in one, because it was the smoke, as far as I remember, on the left side, and we thought it was like, okay, this is some sort of like an industrial environment, but the rest was the city, and we couldn't kind of make it in one image. So if I wouldn't see the smoke, I wouldn't say it's the same image, so which is quite good, I think. So the work was done pretty well. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It has, to me, it has this vibe of the third part of Maze Runner, when they have this city in the middle of like destroyed apocalyptic world, and there is like a city basically like super nice and clean and have all this kind of stuff and banks going on, which is part of the story. And I guess here as well, it's getting there, but I don't know. It's not cutting this 10%. This last 10%, you want to be like, this is it. This is like it has all the potential. You just need to push it. And it's the hardest part. This is the hardest. This is the part when most of the people either make or break. They just like, I just like, screw this. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And they're just like, or they just nail it, and that is the masterpiece, and that is everybody remember the image for the next 5 years, and like, oh, you remember that one, so this is like, look at this one, this is the image. So I think this is like not there yet, and that's it has everything. It kind of has everything. I'm not a huge fan of the spaceships, because they're kind of like evenly sort of like placed and things, and I don't think they add any like any extra dynamic or anything like this. But overall, it's getting there, like. But yeah, it's just needs this 5%, the last 5%.
Yeah, with the spaceships, I feel like they're reinforcing the symmetrical nature of the image. So you've especially these two here, which just literally feel like they're flipped. And I feel like this one here, because it's sitting on negative space, it's sitting on less busy environment behind it, actually feels really nice. If you cropped that section of the image, I feel like the whole thing would feel good. In fact, I'm just gonna do it really quickly. Like that there, while it's not enough to really to be a full image, but that feels really solid. You could scale down this sign here, and all of these elements work together, and even these ships in the background. All of this says to me, hey, there's something over here that's going on, and I want to go there and look at it. So I feel like that was working. That part's working well, and then it's just these 3 and 4 here just get lost in the environment. Nick, I saw you nodding your head for a minute there.
You guys almost sort of beat me to everything I was going to say. I think that the symmetrical composition is the first thing that I noticed about this. It does feel symmetrical compositions can work. There's a reason that a lot of religious iconography and stuff uses symmetrical compositions to draw you in. It can be quite powerful. On this one, it was so much that I was the same. I was almost looking for where's the image been flipped to create the other half, because even the little accent lights on the buildings and things seemed almost perfectly in sync with each other, which creates a very balanced image, but without having too much dynamism to it. And I think probably what was it the previous one we were looking at, compared to this one, they fall to some extent into the same into some of the same problem areas. But what I think this one could really have benefited from, where maybe the other one had that going for it, is light against dark. You kind of you read areas of brightness when you play them against darkness, and vice versa. So I think choosing how to build up that light towards a focal point and layer your elements a little bit in a way that allows a bit of a pathway through the image will stop it looking so flat on a first read, because that's always a danger when you've got a big establisher and you've got a lot of atmosphere in the shot. It can go quite flat quite quickly. You haven't got any kind of foreground elements to really read the depth, read the scale. So I think, yeah, scale here and depth, and just sort of finessing that composition a little bit with your focal point, and just really working on the lighting so it doesn't feel like the image is glowing, but really feels like there are pockets of activity going on. But yeah, like Alexi said, I think just taking this and continuing on with it, putting probably another week of work into really ironing out all those details and trying to get some of the dark against light compositional elements in there would take this to another level.
Mm-hmm. Jimmy, I'm going to go to the next one because we just got to move on a bit. So I'm just going to go to the next one and we'll start with you on it. So next up is Nazario Bizocco, which we reviewed this one, Alex and me, and can't remember who else was on the stream.
Sep was there.
Oh, that's right, Sep. So yeah, it's interesting to see how this has come along. But before I make any comments, I want to see what Jimmy thinks.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I actually struggled with this image a lot. Like, because I liked it and kind of saw it coming along through. Although I tried to like not look at the kind of how people were doing along the way, just to kind of be fresh when I went to judge. But I mean, this one they put a ton of work in. I guess the only thing for me here was if I had to like make a huge kind of like, okay, this is what did it for me, is that I just don't. There's not a lot of story here for me, and maybe that's like for me, kind of like where it kind of fell apart. If I had to like make a complaint, because I actually thought like the other parts of the scene were executed pretty nicely. It's just it's great, but I just don't know, kind of what is the concept of the image? Like, what are that was a big thing for me at looking through everybody's image, is I was really looking for kind of like, what is the story from this? And I guess trying to think about it, I guess for me, like trying to think about it, if this was like one still from a movie, like what could I picture that being, the concept of that image being.
Yeah.
I think that would be my biggest complaint on this, because I actually did struggle with this one quite a bit. I liked it.
Yeah.
It's a good image.
It's that actually reminds me of something that I wanna bring up in this, is that when we talk about story as a map painter, like one of the problems to get your head around is that while map painters are supposed to create an environment for the story to basically a canvas for the story to sit on, so you're creating a background environment that encapsulates the rest of the environment, and you're not necessarily trying to tell a story typically through normal map painting daily work. The thing is, though, that even though you are creating an environment that for instance, to give a more direct example, as a map painter, you wouldn't be compositing these lights in the scene, but in a competition, we obviously need to do that. As a map painter, you'd probably only be working on this background plate here through these portals, and you wouldn't. You're not trying to draw the eye to the background, but that doesn't mean that you can't tell a small story. Things like maybe there's a particular type of sign over here, or actually in our previous example, where on the left side of the city was a cluster of it was clearly the red light district. There were like girls in lingerie and signage that indicated like, hey, this is the red light district, and that's the kind of story that you can tell as a map painter, because it's sort of, I compare it to active and passive story, where the active story is the characters in the foreground and what's actually happening now, and the passive story is things like maybe there was a meteor that hit the mountainside and there's a marking of that meteor, or maybe there's a building that fell down many years ago. Those would be passive elements of the story. What I did like about this image is that these he's done really well with bringing CG into a photographic base, and it's actually to the point where it's not even that obvious. This whole understructure here and this glass walling is the docks. It's underneath the docks in Vancouver. So this entryway here is the bottom level of the convention center in Vancouver, and this is just a big sort of passageway for the cars and mostly trucks to come through. And these are actually big air vents that blast the air through to keep the air circulating. So I feel like he's done an exceptionally good job of integrating different CG elements. Like none of this is there, none of this is in here. This walk isn't there, and he's even added like reflections and things and some water, which is really, really well done.
I thought the lighting in general on this one was really well done. It feels very believable, like and yeah, the sort of surface response with the reflections from the neon catching in the wet tarmac and stuff. I really like that. Yeah. I like this image a lot, actually.
Yeah, I think it was my second choice, as far as I remember. I still have a problem with the arrows. Those arrows, to me, they are robbing half of the image, to at least like for as a viewer, because I'm like, stupid viewer in this regard. I see the arrows and I'm starting looking at like left right away, and there's like nothing. It's like, oh, there's the mole. Okay, well,
Yeah.
that's boring. And then you have to go
Yeah,
back and then
yeah.
you look what's going on there. But like those arrows, they're just like, like why?
I wonder what
But
it would have looked like if he just had the arrows pointing down. Because
that was I think it was a suggestion on the last stream. I don't remember, or at least it was in the comments. I remember we were talking about that.
yeah, because the arrows, I mean, the arrows for one, in my mind, if I was driving through this area, I would think, okay, there's a faded out stop sign there. So if the arrows are pointing down, it says, hey, these two lanes are open and these two lanes aren't. And then they point downwards to say like, here, go underneath this point. But that would also serve to, like, it would point your eyes down here and you would immediately want to look in this area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it's pretty good.
I'll see if I'll just have a look at the comments here. For Nazario's, because it was picked as best technical piece from you, Alex. And also best technical from David Long, who is a senior cinematics artist at Blizzard, which is not all that surprising, since he effectively works in games, and I feel like this image overall presents itself as a very game-centric world. The textures in that feel like a game engine. So David says, this looks like a still from a cinematic with really great artistic and technical points throughout the image. The textures, lighting, and a strong composition to pull the eye towards the mysterious man. The dynamic range of this image gives it great contrast. So yeah, he's referring to this man here, who I feel like if the image was lit slightly differently, we'd actually notice this guy a little bit better. Potentially if we moved the trash cans off to the left a little bit to give him a bit more room to breathe. But because of the balance of visual interest over here on the right side, I don't find myself being all that fascinated with who he is. Yeah, cool. All right, let's move on, and we have so our 6th place position is, and I think this artist's name is actually Daniel Royas, but his name in here is Vinny. So we'll go by Vinny because that's what's written in his submission. But I thought this particular entry was significantly well done. The main things that I think where it potentially falls apart is with the sort of cloudy, dusty elements here. That instead of like he's essentially used, you can see that he's used clouds and then drop the opacity back rather than actually like trying to replicate what smoke or fog or hay or whatever he's tried to do there. But I think when I look at some of the qualities in this image, it just feels really it feels Judge Dredd kind of cyberpunk. But some of the colors, there's a good variation, and it's not that whole like overwhelming pink and fuchsia and cyan. Some of the like just the lens quality in this image just really speaks to me, and I think he's done a really great job of like building up the environment and integrating all of the lighting effects. I mean, it's not, that said, it's not without its issues, as I mentioned, the clouds here, and we've also got like some weird light wrap around this building, and compositionally there's a lot going on here, but then it just feels like there's nothing beyond this first line of buildings. So I feel like some more content back here, or indicate that, you know, there's an ocean and there's docks back there or something.
Yeah, I kind of felt like this one felt like a photographic exposure. Like it really did feel like the kind of the exposure values between the sky and the buildings. It's often the case, and I think we've seen it in a lot of the entries here, where you put so much time into the elements that you want to show everything. To be honest, even film directors do that sometimes, where they know they're paying for a lot of visual effects, they want to see every penny on screen. But it can pay sometimes just to lose some of that and create a more balanced exposure. I think for me, where this one, because I was the same as you, Conrad, I kind of toyed with this as being for a while. Is this a winner? I think where this one fell down a little bit was if you strip away some of the lens effects, you know, the flaring and the I think I can't quite tell from yours, but there was a bit of chromatic aberration stuff, and if I sort of removed all of that and just considered it as a composition on its own, it wasn't quite up there with some of the others. It felt a little bit heavy on the one side. You know, a lot of the elements build up on that left side, and it's a bit of a composition of two halves. But it did feel pretty good. Yeah, it definitely felt like a good natural exposure at first glance.
Yeah. One of the things that really bugged me once I noticed it is that there's zero motion blur on these ships. So once I noticed that, I was like, it literally feels like as soon as we press play, those ships are all going to fall out of the sky. But yeah, I mean, it didn't initially strike me. Jimmy, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with like all the comments that, you know, everybody already said. I don't think I have a ton to add outside of that. I think a lot of it, again, for me, is like somehow the architecture all feels around the same scale, especially the skyscrapers in the background. So there's not like a kind of prominent like piece of architecture, which I think is maybe a little problematic for me. I guess I'm always thinking about it. Like if you're doing an environmental piece like this, then for me, you would want to have, you know, that central kind of, you know, important piece of architecture. And all those skyscrapers, like right there in that kind of like background, mid-ground area are all kind of, they seem to be quite equal. So I think, you know, that was maybe what I thought when I first saw the piece.
And Alex, you actually picked this one as your personal favorite.
Yes, that is true. I like this one. Here's the thing. I like this one a lot. I like this one as an image. So to me, it was kind of a bummer because I was hoping at some point this image will miraculously transform into the good matte painting in terms of like technical quality, which is unfortunately technically, if they would like, we would judge specifically on technical part and on artistic part. Like artistic part, it does a lot, like pretty much everything to me. Technically, it does almost like nothing. It's just, I like this as an image just because of the lens effect. Like Nick said, I liked it as a exposure. I like the feeling of the light. I like the mood of it. So it's like, it strikes me because I personally like the images like this. I had in my personal images, couple of images like this, which is like, oh, it's like lens flare. Some artists like Safir was telling me like, dude, lens flares again? I mean, are you kidding me? Just like get rid of the lens flare. What are you just like? And I did another one. She was like, hey, see, no lens flare, man. You can do it. I mean, if you force yourself, you can do this. But I'm a big sucker for the lens flare because to me, it's like, it's kind of like I guess the cheapest trick in the book, right? To just add it like, oh, we're looking through the lens. That's what's kind of like, what's matte painting about? It's not about painting. It's about looking through the lens of the camera. When you look through the, it's a comp, right? Again, it's like, hey, you want to comp it? Put some stuff on the lens. Like, why your lens is so clean? Dirty it up. Come on, man. So that's what it does for me in this image, and that's why I kind of picked it, because it's. I mean, this one I would probably just have a like little print for myself as a postcard or something like this. It has this quality, like
it looks like a poster that you'd put on your wall when you from a game or something.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that like on the technical part of the matte painting, it just didn't cut, and I was a little bit like disappointed because it looks heavily rendered to me. It looks like okay, we have this and now we have to start working on this. And I was like, okay, so when are we start working on this? When the work is good? Oh no, okay, this is it. Titles, like that's it. And credits, damn it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like but I still like it. So
yeah. All right, cool. Let's keep moving. So who is our next position? Interesting. This one was divisive. So our next person up is Victor. I'm not sure. He just shortens his last name to PKS, so we'll just call him Victor Pix. He's actually been involved in the matte paint contest for a number of years now, and submitted some really interesting stuff. And this one, I think I'll have to just verify, but it was a couple of the judges who voted the submission quite highly. But since it's so architecturally focused, I want to see, Jimmy, what your thoughts are at first.
Yeah, I actually really like this one, to be honest with you. I think I had some good things to say about it. I think it does have like that. It has a good balance of like foreground elements, which I really like, that tell the story, and then it draws your eye into, the cityscape, which I really like. And it was the only one that I thought did, or one of the only ones that kind of played with that idea of framing and kind of looking out from being inside something and then looking out, which I think is interesting and not always easy to do. And so I found this one, I think it was well done. I like this one quite a bit. It went with the COVID theme, so I'm not sure about that, but it's interesting. It's interesting to see like people's take on it. Like COVID is now cyberpunk, but I thought it was also it was also one of the ones that like incorporated some of the stuff from Big, Medium, Small. Am I saying that? Small, Big, like on the right and left, and those look pretty amazing, actually. So,
yeah, he did a good job of integrating those those models. Nick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought this held together pretty nicely as kind of an illustration. piece. Obviously, there's a lot of the key elements in here are elements that you'd imagine would be moving if this were in a final comp. So I was trying to kind of look beyond that. I think probably the thing that distracted me about this one was that I kept feeling like I didn't go as far as trying to draw over it to work it out, but it felt like there was some perspective issues going on. Looking at the sort of lines on the main Eiffel Tower-like structure, and then the top of the that interior that we're looking out from, and then looking at the bottom of that interior that we're looking out from, it sort of seems to converge a little too quickly, and almost to a point that doesn't sort of feel like it follows the horizon line. The background's kind of Dutched, but it might just be the placement of the elements. So all in all, I was kind of struggling a little bit with the perspective in the image, and it was highlighted a little bit as well by the fact that there's that kind of glow coming up from the base when you first go into the background, which I think draws your eye to that all the more. But on the whole, I thought it was nice. There was some nice color range going on the image. It did have a definite focal point. It kind of served as a nice illustration.
Yeah. My my main issue with this was the city in the background here, and how it just doesn't feel connected to the foreground. I kind of like the idea of a big epic city that is, the blue colors are fine, and then we come to the foreground, we've got more dirty browns. And I like that juxtaposition between sort of old derelict cyberpunk and the spacey futuristic high tech. But I feel like just a few more buildings in here to build up towards that city, and to transition the color tonalities a little bit more, would have really helped that. The other problem I have is that we've got these two massive spires that just kind of repeat each other, and it's just visually to me a bit boring in that regard. So I would have liked to have seen something a bit more sort of organic and less symmetrical for that background piece. But I really love the activity going on in this Eiffel Tower, and whatever that happens to be makes you think like, okay, is it under attack? Is that why these guys are here? Like, they're obviously looking at that, and it does beg your question. Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything. To me, I think that was probably my least favorite, and it has two things which is somehow just ruins for me. And I don't like those two guys standing like off the frame almost evenly. To me, it's like they're holding the shield, like when you have like your coats of arms or whatever. There's just holders for something. That's one thing. The second thing, I do not understand the framing of the window, because to me it doesn't rhyme with anything, and some of the things even breaks sort of a perspective, because it kind of goes with the building and then it sweeps like left. And I understand it's inside the train or something like this, but just compositionally, it's like we have all those like nice lines going on, and those are just like kind of like break it. Also, the cut is on the top, is not the whole, it's kind of like not in the middle, but closer to the middle. And we have it's just like the whole framing of the window. I think if without though the guys and the window framing, it would probably work better for me in general. It's just, yeah, and the disconnected piece on the left, that building, which is the lighting and the scale, and it's also because it's framed with this another like kind of like beam. So
I just have
I guess
another idea to just wondering, like, getting rid of the frame, getting rid of the frame. You can still leave some of it in there, because obviously there's not actually, he's covering stuff up down there, but
oh, the bottom part is right, is the top and the left, but
yeah,
but yourself as an artist, it's hard to cut the image when you start doing this. If you're not being forced by your supervisor, you would never leave anything, because this is you working on it. You love every pixel of it. This is like, what? Again? No way. I'm keeping all of this.
Yeah.
So,
It's
which
so
is,
true.
this is the thing. It's like sometimes you have to be a, worst kind of like judge and say, it's like, do we really need this? Like, what if we just crop it? Like, if maybe the crop would make it like, up to the second, third, or the first
Yeah.
guidelines, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, as far as the judges' notes go, I will just read a couple of them because we're starting to get into the realm of having a lot of comments. But so Josh Durham chose this as best composition from him. He's a concept artist who created the cover work that we've been using for the Cyberpunk competition. And he loved the framing of the Eiffel Tower and the repeating elements that gave a really good sense of scale. Fabio Pavelli, he chose this as his personal favorite. And we'll have all of the quotes on the blog article, so you can read them when we've got that online. And who else? Stefan Bernscherer chose this as best composition as well. He says, love the classic rule of thirds composition. Eiffel Tower is in one of the golden areas, and then the darker foreground versus the brighter background works really well. And yeah, cool. So
Now I feel like a dumbass.
I didn't do any rule of thirds or Fibonacci overlays, so don't worry.
It was just like everybody likes it, and I was like, "Ah, no, this is like not working for me." Blah blah blah. It's like, well, actually, everybody said it's cool. Get the hell out of here. Close the door. It's like nobody asked.
Yeah, it's it's like you always throw the junior under the bus and ask him for his comments first, so that you you can then go, oh, okay, yep. All right, well, so
I was like feeling pretty bad for a second. I was like, oh, actually, you know what? Those comments were all like kind of dead on when I like relook at this, and then everybody was like, "This is amazing." I was like, "Never mind, it's okay, I'm safe."
So now we're into our top 4, and this is our 4th place submission. This is Juan Carlos Barquet, who is, as far as I know, he's a map painter. He's an industry map painter, which does not surprise me in the least, looking at his submission. And so now that we've got into our top 4, what I'd like to focus on is still some constructive criticism, but more focusing on the things that caused these submissions to be so high up in the rankings. Like what was it about these top 4 that actually put them in the top 4? So I'll just start with this one, and I thought it was probably the most realistic of all of the submissions. It just feels like it's a photograph. It actually feels like it was taken with an old film camera with a crappy, mold-ridden lens, and the focus is slightly out, and you've got aberrations here and there, and the whole thing is slightly softened because of that. And I guess in my mind, I think of Cyberpunk as a world where, sure, we have high tech stuff and futuristic technologies, which would mean having like crisp images, but also I think about Cyberpunk as being like a division of worlds where the people who without money are having to scrounge together to make things that like make tools and gadgets and things. So I think of this as somebody who has taken a photograph with some of that really ad hoc MacGyvered technology, and that's why the lens is a little bit soft. I think though, aside from the lens effects, it's actually difficult to know how much he's used photography and how much he's used 3D, because some of these elements, like the light down here, the way it spills onto these elements here is just perfect, and it makes me think that that's a photograph that he's used. But then, is it potentially just really good 3D? I'm left wondering, and I think he's done really well with the depth here. And the only two things I would say that that didn't put it higher in the list would be that it's quite monotonal, and I'm not sure if there's enough actual story and actual content in here to really give it that much interest. Yeah, Alex, why don't you give your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's pretty. This is, which is, I guess it's a good thing, because this is the perfect background matte painting to me. I mean, aside of the ratio, which is, it's kind of hard to judge, because majority of, like, not majority, all of the DMP, there is no vertical movies, right? I mean, at least for now. So it's all supposed to be
Yeah.
horizontal. So when you look at this, you're not judging it as a frame, you're judging it as a photo or as a poster. That's how I judge it. And I think this is the
Mm.
perfect, like, a background, because if you put something, like, if you put a character in front of it, it wouldn't draw too much attention, but it would tell the story behind it. So you can just, like, it's the perfect background piece to me, which is, sometimes that's what matte painting is. It's just a perfect background, just to help to tell the story. And because it's so, well made, in a sense, like, it can do the heavy lifting, but it was just, like, quietly stand there and just do the job. And I think
Mm.
that's what kind of helped it to get, to the to this position, because it's pretty solid. Sorry, solid technical work, was not, without any screaming, like, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's just like, okay, slow narrative, that kind of stuff, to me at least.
Nick, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This one was an outlier just in how much it felt like it was just a photograph, almost to the point where I think it started to work against the piece to an extent compared to some of the others, because I was almost looking at this and thinking it could be Tokyo on a misty day almost. It's not. It maybe lacked some of the cyberpunk elements that really would make me go, okay, yeah, we're talking cyberpunk here, as opposed to just a natural environment that might exist already. But the actual execution of it was almost perfect. It's got, looking at it now again, it's got the value handling is just spot on. I think that's the thing that I noticed the most. It looks like Jeremy Mann painting or something. It's just got a really good feel to it. I actually wasn't bothered as much by the monochromatic nature of it, because I thought that kind of highlighted some of those red accents quite nicely. It's got a focal point. I was thrown a little bit by the aspect ratio, like Alexi said, because it was I was kind of thinking, okay, how does this work as a sort of film matte painting? But I'd take it a step further than what he said as well, and say more often than not, matte paintings are just there as kind of secondary elements to fill in the space, and you have to try and find a way to work your design elements into often quite small areas, and this is kind of perfect in that regard. So it definitely was something that you look at and think, the atmosphere handling here, the level of sort of light interacting with the atmosphere, that kind of glow but not glow, because it is actually lights interacting with the architecture as well. It was just, this was really spot on in that regard.
Yeah, I'm gonna just before we throw it over to Jimmy, I want to see what this would look like with a different crop. I mean, it's not holding up in terms of resolution, but this is what I imagine the film crop would look like. I mean, maybe they would actually extend the edges if you were working, if this was being created for a shot. But I mean, this still works to me in my mind. Like, maybe these buildings down in the background here have the wrong sort of ratio. They're a bit too tall, but all of these details in here, and it even improves the storytelling of these two characters. Like standing up here, you start to actually notice them a bit better. I wonder if Juan Carlos was like wanted to try this aspect ratio because if he's working day to day on shots, sometimes you just want to try a different approach. And it's also not unheard of to have a portrait orientation matte painting for a show, because if you've got a camera that's pans down from the top to reveal these characters, you would have to create that elongated matte painting.
That's true. I think I even
You-
said
you
that
would
in my
even-
notes for this piece. But,
Yeah.
it would hold well for that sort of a move. Yeah.
Yeah.
To sell it as a matte painting, from basically top to bottom, you need to have a little smudges on the sides, and you have a little bit like a matte cutouts, because this is how you sell it.
Yeah,
Since
yeah.
it's a real matte painting, not like a photo. You just do it's like a lens flare. This is what
Yeah,
you do. It's like, oh,
yeah.
but it's like, and we started painting and stuff.
That's so funny, because looking at it, I was imagining just extending the edges out with a bit of exactly what you just described, the matte cutout, rough, indicated content. Jimmy, from an architectural point of view, do you love this image, or are you still like left
Yeah,
wanting?
I mean, I think no. I mean, I think this image was really well executed. I mean, the vertical aspect ratio is something that we do get to do in ArcViz a little bit more often. It's actually usually, yeah. I mean, because you're constantly dealing with skyscrapers, it's pretty common that we would do that. So I was really happy to see it, and I think that it's technically a really strong piece. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, okay, this is something that like I could probably get away with making for at work. Was the first thing I thought.
Mm,
So which was interesting. So, but yeah, I think it was quite strong.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
do like I think I had the same thoughts as you. Is like I wasn't sure, and I think that's good. Me personally, like I wasn't sure what was 2D and 3D, because like you said, like that the glow from like the alleyway at the city, and then that kind of bleeding onto the sides of the buildings right there where your mouse is. It for me, it kind of screams. It has like the technical of a photograph, but at the same time, I was like, okay, how much of this was 3D, and
Yeah.
did you place a fill light down there? But I really do like it a lot.
Yeah. It's difficult to tell, and I feel like that is telling in itself, as
Yeah.
to the quality. So I'm going to just read out the votes here for this piece, because there's quite a few of them. We've got best technical was given by me, Josh Durham, and Sepp Sontag, and also Nick. We all gave this one the best technical. I think just all of the elements that came together, as we said, just makes the whole image feel very well executed. And personal favorite was Sepp. This is Sepp Sontag's personal favorite. He is he was the environment supervisor at Image Engine for a couple of years, and now he's stepped over into like an assets position. He's now working entirely in Unreal for film. So he's certainly done his fair share of the DMP pipeline, and I think that is it. I'll just read Sepp's quote. He says, "It reminds me of my time in Hong Kong and captures the cyberpunk theme the most realistically of how I would envisage it." Cool.
There's one other comment I was going to make on that one, Conrad, if there's
Yeah.
time.
Yep.
At the very bottom of the image is something that I think would have helped this a lot, but almost where your cursor is, where we got the edge of the building, it's a bit of an unfortunate tangent with the edge of that other
Yeah.
building. Like they run right alongside. So there was a bit of me that was struggling to, just at a glance, to read the depth, which was
Yeah.
obviously helped out by the scale cues on the elements and the depth cue on everything, which you understand it. But it's one of those things where if that edge of that building came out just a little bit further, so that they crossed over, it would have just reinforced the depth a lot more.
Totally agree.
So
Yeah.
just a little small thing, but it's so prominent in an otherwise perfect image.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how once you get to this kind of level of just perfection, I guess, things like this become the things that you start to pick up on, which you wouldn't even notice in a normal sense. Cool. All right. Whoops. All right. Who is next? So our third place winner, and we kind of need a drum roll here, but is Adrian. So this image here. So I'm gonna kick this straight to you, Jimmy, because I feel like it's gonna be right up your alley.
Yeah, I like this image a lot. I think I made some comments about this image. I think it has a really good central, like it draws your eye back um, really well to the sphere, and I like that a lot. And it also has like, I liked the Inception kind of like flipped buildings down there on the side. It almost feels like a Central Park kind of New York that's gotten like kind of eroded away, and now there's just buildings left there. So that's kind of where my mind went with it. So yeah, I really like this image. I thought it was really well done.
Alex, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I like this one too. Yeah, it has pretty much like clear story point, clear path to it, so you just like know what's going on. It has a lot of this one actually sells a lot of the busy, huge, like city vibe. So there is something. It's just the tip of the iceberg, right? There is probably a lot of stuff going on under this, and you can start like thinking of what's happening. Yeah, I like atmospherics. I like the time of the day. Pretty good execution. My only concern was some of the buildings were repetitive just by nature of 3D, and it's just a nitpicking. Like, I'm not against it. Could be a couple of the similar buildings in the city. To me, then they would need to be more grouped in some sort of like area where it's like, okay, so this part is this architecture and this part is that architecture. But if they're just like scattered randomly, it gives this generic feel a little bit to it, just because it's just scattered, so it's not like placed. There is no like it kind of like dials down a little bit of the sense of the design, but that's my only concern pretty much about this
image. Yeah, my overall favorite part of this whole design is this central section here, and I kind of wish that we got indications of it off to the left and right as well, because what I love about the cyberpunk world is that idea of being lost. It's almost like there's a new surface, and that's the feeling I get here, is that this is not actually ground level, but this is actually 5 or maybe 200-300 meters above ground level, and we've built on top of everything again, and you can kind of go down to the depths, kind of like I think Fifth Element had a really good feeling of that as well. And these highways, I think it's not actually that obvious, but back here, the part of the highway splits off, one of the lanes splits off and goes down, and I feel like I just wish that was a little bit more like sold a little bit heavier, because it indicates like we've got these levitating cars or maglev or something that they can just go directly down, and kind of like Minority Report, where they just rotate on their side, and and go vertical. But for me, where I would like to see this get improved is with the use of clouds and atmosphere in here, because it definitely needs it, and it works kind of quite well down here. But again, we've got these transparent clouds that have been added, and that's just not the way that clouds will build up. They don't get fluffy, but stay transparent. As soon as they get fluffy, they become more opaque. So when you're creating smokestacks, that's great. But when you're creating fog and pollution and mist and haze, it needs to be much more like this stuff through here, which is working really well. And there was also just some of these elements through here that still feel like they need to be matched in terms of perspective to the buildings, and maybe just pay a little bit more respect to the shapes that they're on. But that would really be the main things. You can also see some elements in the backhand here that seem to be either out of perspective or actually continuing over the edges of the building. Maybe that's because they were neon signs, but it's not quite clear. Nick, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think I haven't got too much more to add to that. I think probably the thing that I was looking for here and wished I saw a little bit more of, you kind of touched on, Conrad, which was a bit more of a kind of design that holds together all these disparate elements. I would have loved to see how those roads, what's holding them up. Where's the constructs that support that? How do those interact with the buildings? And then I think just working on the technical stuff. But this has that kind of big establishing shot first read, and I like the focal point with the sphere as kind of that kind of old monolithic element in there. Works quite well against all of the busyness everywhere else. So it was there was a lot to like here, and I thought using the light to highlight those road structures in an interesting way was a good idea. I think it maybe had to make sure it's justified lighting, but all of the highlights are motivated correctly. But otherwise, yeah, nice piece.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. You subconsciously notice the light hitting there, but I think I mean, it's 3D, so he's probably placed a light out there and then put some blockers in. So it does feel like it integrates well, but it really does add a lot of interest, and these little lens glows are kind of cool. Yeah, I also really like the tonality of the yellow in here. It feels very it just feels very sort of Blade Runner style, hot. Not necessarily hot, but sunset warm. Cool. So
I think you're right on that. It looks almost a little bit like some of the on the screen left side buildings. They go so hot that you would almost expect that you would need a midday sun to go so hot because you've almost got the sun peeking in on the right side of the image. So it feels like the exposure of the whole thing could be redressed a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. Or just bring the sun out from behind the clouds, and or lift this cloud bank a little bit and have the sun just be more prominent over there, because then that would justify that brightness. Cool. So looking at the votes on this one, so we have so James picked this as the best technical. Jimmy, I'll read out your quote here. You said, "As an architect, I find this image really exciting and well executed. The coloring and details are insane for this type of scene. It has a cyberpunk Inception feeling, with the buildings turned horizontal. The sphere leads the viewer's eye through the image. This would have been my top pick, but was looking for an image that had a little more story to it. The technical work and details are amazing, though." And I think that was the only comment. So yeah, congratulations to Adrian. That's our 3rd place winner. All right, here we go. We're getting into the exciting parts. So our 2nd place is Steph. I think her last name is Larusso, or Larusso. As far as I know, Steph is like a junior level. Don't believe she's currently in a studio, but I've seen some of her work, and she's sort of got all of the makings of a map painter. She sort of it seems that she understands the approach and the sorts of things that a map painter would be tasked with doing, and I think in terms of, and especially looking at this submission, I think this was my I voted for best composition and my personal favorite. It was it just, as soon as I saw it, I felt that reminiscent feeling of old school cyberpunk, and I really felt like I had this sort of wave of atmosphere hit me, in terms of like feeling like I was in these favelas and these slums down here. And what I particularly liked about this is that she's married both the Total Recall slum life cyberpunk with that not Blade Runner, but maybe Ghost in the Shell style scale, and it really feels like, to me, like civilization has split in two, in terms of there's the everyone else, and then there's the people who have the money, and they've simply built these massive highways on top of everything else, and that, for me, compositionally, I mean, even when you look at it as when you zoom out from it, if I just do this, I feel like it works as a tiny thumbnail as well, because it's got those massive blockers that are just sweeping over the top. I would say that I would have liked the highways to have a little bit more detail on them, or to have been slightly smaller in scale, because they do block a lot of interest, and they take away. There's sort of nothing filling in that interest. But I think overall, an exceptional piece. Nick, why don't you go next?
Sure. Okay, yeah, you're dangerous going with me first, because I could wax lyrical about this one. I really, really love this piece. I think I picked this as my personal favorite as well. And it's, yeah, I love the composition on this. Those sweeping lines, it would hold up as just an abstract painting, because the composition's so strong in this. I think that the design element here worked really, really well. You feel like those slums have just been relegated to those low areas under the highways. Like, the design of that kind of feels like what you'd expect, and also the fact that there's some natural terrain creeping in there as well. It's just kind of been ad hoc, roughshod built on top of. I think was really nice to include some of that. Then you've got those big sort of high tech areas in the background that look really cool. If I had to try and nitpick over some of this, it would maybe be that some of the elements in the background, maybe the perspective on some of them could do with a bit of finessing, and just there was one element that caught my eye just on the screen right side, in that little gap in the back where the values felt like they fell off a little weirdly, and maybe the perspective of some of the elements right in the distant background were a little off. Yeah, just in that little pocket in there.
Yeah, that piece there.
That felt a little like a last minute change or something. I'm not sure, but that didn't quite sit with the rest of the image for me. But the whole thing here just felt really believable, and I just thought the design of this one as an environment design piece was spot on.
Yeah, the one element that really threw me off was this sort of painterly effect here. And I get that it's meant to look like her hair sort of coming out of the building, and I like that as an idea, and how to actually execute that in a photoreal way is like anyone's guess. You would usually that would get thrown to like the effects guys. So as a matte painting piece, these two elements here kind of just felt like big brush strokes on the page. And I didn't actually notice any of this over here because I just found my eye just sinking into this area constantly. But yes, you picked this as your personal favorite and also your best composition vote. So we were both the same on that. I won't read out the comments because we'll put that into the blog, and Steph, you can read everything there once it's online. Alex, why don't we go over to you?
Yeah, I'm not gonna talk about anything crazy. You know, got my part. I like this, and the funny part is like you mentioned Total Recall. That's exactly what I was thinking when I saw this image. To me, it was like it could be a frame before they cut to Colin Farrell on on the
Yeah.
balcony, just looking into something. That would be
Yeah.
exactly like the same feeling. Like, okay, I understand where he's looking and what's going on, and for him, it's like this kind of like glimpse into this posh life going on. Yeah, I like the idea, I like the execution. I think the light wise, to me, this is almost the perfect execution in terms of like how would I expect Cyberpunk to look like. Yes, exactly. Yes,
You done this
that
on
is
purpose?
that is
What's that?
that is
Am
it.
I doing this on that?
That's my shot.
Is
Yeah,
that?
Yeah.
that's my shot. So, yeah,
Oh,
It
here we
is.
go.
you
We
gotta
have
be careful.
full house here. We have a winner.
That's
So, but having done that shot, I feel like that Steph's piece felt like it would have fit really well into that movie, but had a design of its own. It wasn't a pastiche. It wasn't a rip off. I felt like it held up really well as it on its own. So.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just so that I don't think everyone might have caught on what you said there, but Nick just said that this is his shot from the film. So that's a bit of context as to who he is and what he's done, what he's worked on. But it's funny
Not
that
only mine, I should add. There was
well,
a few good people who worked on it. But,
yeah, that's always the case. But it's funny that you mentioned that, Alex, because this is exactly what I thought when I saw the image as well, and primarily because of that feeling through here. And there's a couple of other shots like this that you see from the this more wide angle. There's this one here where you see a little bit more of the city, and it feels like he really is lost in the slums, and that's what I loved about this one as well. And it's funny that we all pulled the same reference, and I think that really speaks volumes for it. And as you said, Nick, it doesn't feel like a rip off or anything. It feels like its own concept, its own piece.
it still fits the cyberpunk brief perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jimmy, from your point of view, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I really like this piece. I think the only thing that I would say is I think it could have been pretty cool just to have some underneath either lighting on the freeways or details like you were talking about, just because they're so prominent. But it also would have kicked off just a little bit of a glow onto the slums where maybe it gets a little dark in there. I think that would have been pretty cool just to have just a tad bit of a little bit of the, just a little bit of highlights on, one could picture like these kind of tin roofs or something like that. And you just have like just a little bit of reflection coming off these tin roofs from, the overpasses. I think that could have been really brought it to life for me, because it gets a little dark and a little muddy in that in the bottom. And rightly so, it should, right? I mean, it's all about kind of this duality of like the haves, the have nots. And so not insinuating, and I like things that are quite dark. I make kind of more contrasty dark images. So I think just having just that kind of bounce of little bit of light would have been pretty cool under there.
Yeah. The it's this kind of element through here. If I feel like that might be a bit of a waterway through there that's sort of separating the high class people from the slums. And you do get a bit of purple glow through there, and it would make sense for that purple glow to reflect off some of the elements back there and slowly fade out towards the foreground. And I totally agree, because if you take this image and if you zoom out, you look at it from from afar, you kind of get it's quite a lot of darkness down here. And if it just had like lifted just a little bit of light, it would feel really good. And potentially
I mean,
some more lights down here to add some life into those buildings.
yeah, I just think it's like it's also one of those things where it's like the overpasses, like, we in this image we've obviously evolved. I mean, there's holograms on the building, but then the freeways still feel quite kind of like 1980 like construction. So I mean, just referential, you could look at like Sheikh Zayed's bridge by Zaha Hadid or something like that, to where you have some kind of details on the underneath side of this, these overpasses to kick that light off. I think would have really gone a long way in this image.
Yeah, agreed. Well, congratulations, Stephanie, or Steph. I'm not sure if you go by Stephanie. So I'll just read out the votes again. So for best composition, it was me, David Long, and Nick Marshall all gave votes on that. I'll read out David Long's comments here. He says, a striking graphic composition that hit me immediately. The silhouettes of the overpass are strong, and the shadow details are just enough so that they aren't crunchy dark, but exposed for the top building lights as to not blow out. So he's talking about this enough detail down here, but also nothing too overexposed up here as well. For best technical, that was Stefan and Fabio both gave you best technical, and then for personal favorites, you got my vote, David Long, and Nick Marshall again. So actually, David, Nick, and I all voted exactly the same for best composition, and
The racket.
yeah, they're in cahoots. So Stephanie, you've got a yearly subscription to Matte Paint and Artist Plus. You've got a Gaia Pro license and a 3D model pack from Big Medium Small, which is, I think, still under wraps. So it's a brand new one. And also a 12-month ArtStation Pro subscription. And now for our grand final winner. No surprises at this point with our top 10. I think. So this is from Paula Munoz. I can't quite pronounce her last name, but she's working in Vancouver now. Is she actually at DNEG potentially? No, she's not. I'll have to.
Environment.
Yeah, I'll have to research. She's in Vancouver. She moved from I think Colombia, and was studying there, and then got a job. And I've seen her over the last 3 years improve, and as you would expect, once you get a full-time gig, it just becomes like this explosion of skills, because you're pumping through work and you're learning from the people beside you, and you just really improve very quickly. I'm not going to start on this one. I'm going to throw it over to Jimmy.
Yeah, I when I saw this piece, I was pretty blown away. I love this piece. I love that it's For me, I think something I was looking for in the Cyberpunk competition was somebody to push it outside of what we traditionally see as Cyberpunk. And this started to do that. There's actually the city is not the main character, which I was looking for. It's kind of just supports the robot running away and frames it as well. I thought the coloring was, beautifully done. You kind of have these teals with the red. I think my only complaint was it started to be like so. Like I kept going back and looking. That my only complaint was that the park sign reads backwards. Like that's how
Mm.
like much I was looking at it. Like
Yeah.
that, I got to the point. I got to the point where that made me mad. Like I was just like, well, I mean, if I was parking and I was driving in, like it would either be the other way or I would see the back of the sign, which would have nothing on it. But like this image was, I love the vertical aspect ratio. Yeah, I just don't have, much to say negative about it. I think,
Yeah.
I think I probably voted it for a lot of my things.
I'm just on the side here trying to find the original image that she worked from, because this is one of the things that really struck me about it, was uh, how recognizable the original shot was, for at least for me, because I took this shot,
Yeah.
and I feel like, going from that to that, I think there's another. We released a bunch of these images for free as part of the competition. So yeah, so she's used these bags over here, and some of these structure, like some of these elements, she's reused them and changed the text on them. And I think that for me was what I was looking for, was somebody to, because it's a photography, it's a Photoshop competition. I wanted to see primarily somebody taking photography, or at least using 3D and like heavily working over the top of it. And as soon as I saw this, I thought, like, I remember that street, but I knew that the elements had all been pulled from different areas. Nick, I think you gave this. Oh no, you didn't. Well, maybe it was Alex or someone else. But Nick, what's your thoughts on it?
I really like this piece. I think that it's got a great depth and there's a good storytelling aspect to it. I think there's it's the only one of the submissions that I think stuck to more of a 1 point perspective, which is kind of an interesting take. It really draws your eye right down that one street. Feels super lived in. I particularly like the top half of this frame, because I think the way that those overlapping dark shapes
Yeah.
just sell the depth works really well to me, probably better than the lower half where it's a bit busier. But yeah, all in all, really nice. And yeah, it's a trip to see the original photo and then see the final result.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea, dude. I thought this was like mostly 3D. Like I was like I'm blown away to see those. I am blown away to see those images. It's so impressive, and I agree with what was just said. Like the top half of the image. I think what was so nice about this image is like you just keep wanting to like wander around. Like firstly, you go to like the robot and you think of the story, and then you just wander around. And I think that's when I really start to like an image, is just keeps you wandering around. And it's crazy.
So I've just loaded up the Paula's submissions here for the competition, so we can have a look at it, because this is really where I think I try not to look at the whips when judging the finals, because you don't want to taint your opinion of it. But really, when you start to look at these submissions, you get the feeling of, I mean, even this idea of more open sky would have been amazing. But she's taken some of the photography, and that's great to see as well. She's used Ghost in the Shell as a reference. And so then she's got this one here. So we'll just flick through her his submissions. So it looks like she was toying with the idea of a more landscape crop, or maybe that was just it was just her banner image and then we got her final. One thing that was really nice to see when you flick between this final and the previous one, there are some subtle adjustments to like the levels and the perspective of certain elements that don't initially look out of perspective, but then when you see the change, you go, okay, like if you've drawn the all of your perspective lines, you'll notice that. And yeah, so Alex, over to you.
Yeah, I'm just like everybody. I'm like just blown away by the plate. That's like a miracle to me. Like I wouldn't. I just. It's just hands down. I wouldn't start if I would given plate like this. I would like swear half of the day. Then I would probably go home and cry and everything because I would be like, I'm not doing this. This is insane.
Yeah.
If somebody tells me like, this
Well,
is
I've
the
worked with you enough
concept.
to know the truth of that.
Yeah, this is the
Yeah.
concept, like say, and this is the plate. I would be like, no, yeah, and not just this is how I do, this is how I roll, basically. And so he knows that's why, no, it's like I liked it. There was one of my favorite, and I think I voted as a first place for this piece. It tells the story and everything. To me, it's like it works like an homage to, again, coincidentally, the shot Nick, I think, was doing, at least for the trailer, in the Blade Runner, when he goes home from his first sort of like, I guess, assignment, and there is like a street view when there's with the snow kind of like blower or whatever that thing, and then
Yeah, you're
he
right.
kind of like stops and goes like the pans up into Atari logo, I think, or something like this. I think, Nick, you were doing this, at least I remember
Yeah,
right.
I know the shot you mean. Yeah, there you go. It's
Yeah.
kind of midway
So to
down,
me,
a little lower,
yeah, yeah.
Comrade. A little lower. There you go. That go back where you were. Up,
Oh,
up
this
a
one.
bit. Right. One more over.
Yeah,
That one.
this one.
There you go. That guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
me, this is like, like what if we do like, some people like they do like Akira sort of like posters, but with the different characters in different universes. So to me, that was like, okay, so this we're gonna go like full on disco, like cyberpunk, like if like Thor Ragnarok, sort of like an intro, but like doing shot like this in a way. Like this is sort of like a narrow streets in a
Yeah.
way, and like
Yeah.
this kind of, but like we go cyberpunk sort of like with the colors and like a little bit like different, obviously, camera position and everything, but kind of gave me that vibe.
Yeah.
And yeah, the story is there. It's like a tons of details. I didn't go through the I mean, I kind of scrolled, but I didn't go as I guess nitpicking like Conrad, like you did, which is impressive, because some, especially if you're doing it for the contest, not a lot of people would just go and do like minor technical fixes, right? Because I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes you just like you don't have time, or you just like sometimes you don't see them or anything. So that also speaks pretty much about the determination, and about like self-control, and like the quality level
Yeah.
the artist tries to basically keep through the piece. And yeah, I mean, once again, this is like from plate to this is like hero. I'm not gonna even comment or anything.
It almost reaches the point where you feel like I'm not qualified to critique this because there's so much work in it.
Yeah, it's just like the amount of work is like, sometimes I was just like, whoa.
Yeah, it's it's fantastic. One thing I also liked about it is the grading on it. It's less cinematic than I would typically expect people to push them. Like some of the other submissions that we saw were, as Nick said, very photographic exposures. This is like photographic exposure, but graded by a photographer to try and
Mhm.
maximize
Right.
the emotion and the atmosphere for like a print. And we've even got this vignette around it, which you wouldn't typically put on a matte painting. but yeah, I just loved that it came from a completely different angle in that regard. And when I was scrolling through the finalists, as soon as I landed on this one, it was like the same as when I landed on Steph's submission, and I was just like, what? Like, how much detail is in this? And at first I thought, okay, I recognized the shapes, but I thought there was still a significant amount of 3D in it. To which I was obviously then corrected, because there's a significant amount of 2D. So yeah, do you guys want to like make any other final comments on this one as our last piece?
Like I said, I thought it was a blender, for most part, and then overpainted, because that's what people do nowadays. So hats off to this. This is 2D. This is truly deserved to me, at least. So.
Nice to see someone really pushing what 2D's capable of doing, and then getting a win out of that. So congratulations.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Well, I'll just quickly flick over to the prizes, just to read those out for everyone. So Paula is going to get a Wacom Intuos Pro, an Artist Pro yearly subscription to Map Paint, a Gaia license. To those out there who don't know what Gaia is, it's a terrain modeling software, similar to World Machine and I can't remember the other one. So basically, you build height maps and use different fractals and algorithms to erode those height maps and create 3D terrains. She was also getting the 3D pack from Big Medium Small and a 12-month ArtStation Pro account. So yeah, massive congratulations to everyone, to Paula in particular, and Steph, and our third place winner, who I've forgotten. I think it was Adrian. So we will have a let me just stop sharing my screen. So we will have a blog article going up online in the next few days that will have all of the comments from the judges and any other sort of little awards and things that came with each of the submissions, and you can have a look through all of those. But I think for now, thanks guys for spending your Saturday night with me. And yeah, it was really great to review them all.
Yeah, man.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks for
It's
having
been great, and the quality of the submissions was outstanding as well. It made me nervous judging them, because the quality was so high throughout.
Yeah. I felt the same, and it was really interesting. I'm not sure if it was obvious to you guys, but about a week and a half beforehand, I mean, Alex, you joined me for it, but it was really interesting that in the last week and a half, the submission quality just went through the roof. And I guess that's kind of typical, because artists will leave it to the last 2 days to do everything anyway. But it was really great to see the quality of the submissions, for sure. All right, thanks everyone for joining me, and the other judges. Happy New Year to everyone, and we will see you soon.